Hello, and welcome to another episode of the ProfileTree Podcast. My name is Marcus, and today I am joined by Dylan and David. And the topic we have for you today is using AI development tools. To get us started off, let's talk a little bit about Northern Ireland. So at the moment, we're at the center of a 188 million AI revolution that a lot of businesses don't even realize is happening. Dylan and David are going to show you the technical side of a couple useful wee tools that you may want to look into. But to start, let's go into some of the real problems that businesses are having right now and how some of these AI tools can absolutely transform your workflow and productivity. So in terms of what businesses are struggling with, the biggest one that we see is productivity. So Northern Ireland's actually 13% below the UK average, according to stats from 2022, and this is widening from 11% in just the year prior, 2021, ranking 10th place amongst the UK's 12 regions. So yeah, quite a heavy statistic. So when developers take 13% longer to deliver the same output as other UK companies, it's definitely a massive factor. Even just across the border as well with the Republic, productivity in NI is 20% lower as well. And the Republic's productivity is actually 8% higher than the UK average, creating a double whammy essentially for us as well. There was gains during the COVID-19 pandemic. We actually climbed up to around 7th place from previously being last place in the UK's 12 regions with a 6.7% productivity growth. But this improvement was never sustained. So this shows that NI businesses can compete when they're forced to innovate rapidly, but they struggle to maintain this momentum without any external pressures building that. Coupled with this, around 40% of graduates only are ready for AI roles when they're on an all-high kind of demand right now. So this creates a vicious cycle where businesses can't adopt productivity-enhancing AI tools because they lack the skilled staff, but without any adoption at all, then they can't compete for the talent in the first place. Additionally, you'll already find that 61% of employees are using AI tools in some fashion, even when it's not within your governed workflow. And this can be for some simple tools out there, such as ChatGPT and Claude. But without proper governance and building it into your workflow, then it's harder to measure productivity gains. You're not really ensuring the quality, and you want to make sure to manage any intellectual property risks as well. So I think to start us off, David would like to talk about some of the tools that can be utilized within development.
Yeah, so there's a sort of buzzword, if you will, or a buzz phrase, or so you call it, that's sort of going around social media. People are talking about vibe coding. This idea that you can use AI to basically create something and you're coding it, but you're not actually coding it. You can do it as a everyday person or an everyday business owner, or employee of a business. And the two that are big at the minute are Bolt and Lovable. So they basically do the same thing. They both have free options as well, so you can try them out. But what they essentially do is they allow you to, similar to ChatGPT or Claude or any of those other AI chatbot, is you can ask it to basically create some sort of application for you. So there's a couple of use cases, like you might want to get boards or for accounting software, those sort of things that can sort of build that in for you. It can also kind of do website, but it does have some caveats with that. One of the cool things about this is there's a really good way of getting your foot in the door. So when you're using Bolt or Lovable for any sort of development like that, you don't have to rely on, expensive costs with a developer. So it's a good way to get started and get your foot in the door. But before you get too excited about using it yourself, there are some limitations. So I would definitely recommend trying the free tier. So for both of them, you sort of get about 2 or 3 prompts. They are quite limited with the free tier, and the pricing is about the same for both of them. Lovable is a wee bit more less developer heavy. So if you want one that's a bit more for the layman, then I would use Lovable as opposed to Bolt. But I would try both because they both have a free tier. The limitations that I want to talk about are just about using these sort of AI tools are just things like you could ask it, for example, to build you a landing page for your business, which would be great. But the thing is, then in the future, if you wanted to edit that, you really restrict it in what you can do. You're gonna rely on the credit to do that, and there are times where the AI can be inconsistent. It can change the layout, things like that. Um, Also, another thing is sometimes the design, which I know Dylan's gonna talk about, can sometimes not be doesn't stand out. Basically, it sort of looks AI. There's a
Yeah.
kind of thing where a lot of AI designs start to look very similar to each other. But one of the interesting things that I thought was a stat about 80% of AI projects or AI, like 'cause a lot of people just use it to type something in. They never make it past the prototype stage. So 80% of them don't make it past that. So
I think it's fair to say as well, especially over the last even just year, a lot of these AI tools, they're kind of coming and going at a really rapid pace. So it's a little bit hard to
Yeah.
settle on this when, other tools that businesses may use in the development space have, at least been around long enough a while that you know all of their quirks, all their pros and cons. But there's always seems to be new ones popping up these days now.
I think the first sort of kid on the block was Bolt. I think it sort of started it off,
Yeah.
at least in a very advanced way in terms of creating things that ChatGPT couldn't do previously. And then Lovable sort of came along as well. So I'm with you. There is obviously that learning curve. They do the same things as you mentioned, David, but there is obviously the slight differences.
yeah, because the thing that so Bo kind of started as you said, but then the thing that Lovable did, which is the reason I think it's very popular on social media, is that Lovable doesn't show the technical stuff. So if you start typing, if you like type into it, create this app for me, it will basically respond to you the same way ChatGPT would, and then it would build it. So it kind of eliminates, because I think for some people when they use Bolt, it can be a wee bit overwhelming just because it would show you the files and stuff like that. But they do the same thing, it's just packaged slightly differently.
I noticed recently with Bolt, I know there's, as you said, Marcus, it's continually being updated. But I have noticed recently, with Bolt specifically, it's sort of brought in a chat feature, so it's not all coding. You can actually turn it into a different mode and ask it like general questions and stuff like that. So you can sort of use it as your chatbot, ChatGPT sort of agent as well, and then switch it back to the coding side. So you have that sort of two-way street, if you like.
Yeah, that's been a absolutely massive surge over the last while is the kind of AI assistant tools. What you essentially want is something that completely understands everything that has been developed, which is a hard task even for a developer if they coded everything themselves, or memories are only so good. So yeah, tools like that definitely going to make life a lot easier, especially if you ever need to revisit stuff later, which, as David said, can sometimes be a heck of a lot trickier whenever you want to change stuff that's been set in stone for a little while already.
If you're talking about a website, let's talk about something like what you might have as a business. So if you use something like Shopify for your e-commerce website, or you WordPress for your website, you have ability to log in and edit the content on your website, export your products, see what tags, adjust the tags. Those are all things we kind of take for granted. And these sort of platforms that have been established, they've been around, for 10, 20 years. With these new AI tools like Bolt and Lovable, they are only going to factor that in if you tell it to. And for the most part, you're not going to consider that until way down the line. And by that point, it might be really difficult for it to tack that on.
Precisely, yeah. And this is where, you'll hear different industries be concerned about the oncoming AI tool usage, and they'll worry about job losses and everything, but expertise is absolutely needed still in each of these instances. There's only, these chatbots still be set up to succeed as much as can be, but context is always very, very important. And the same goes even at the simplest level. If you're getting a chatbot to put together some content for a website as well, only someone versed in the topic that you tell it to write about is really going to be able to confirm and make sure that everything is in a workable state. You usually see that 70-30 split that people will mention about whenever anything is generated that way.
Obviously, the tools are very powerful. You're 100% right, Marcus. Given that they do a lot for you, but they're not all there just at least at this minute in time, especially nowadays. I think if you think of the more front end developments, if you think of apps, or if you think of web applications, or those sort of stereotypical dashboard pages that you see that people would have maybe spent hours on designing and developing, in terms of especially Bolt, you could generate a full dashboard page with maybe four, yes, they may be static, but 4 pages that are fully designed within about maybe 5 minutes. And I think that at the minute is probably the one thing that is 100% doable with the likes of these applications. It's the connector to that front end that's the thing that I think, as you mentioned, Marcus, is you need that expertise on the back of that. David, you've mentioned as well, those sort of platforms, Shopify, WordPress, they all come with those built-in features. Those things will not be built in. If you type a prompt into Lovable or Bolt or whatever it may be, and you asked it to create you something, it's only thinking of the big picture. It's not thinking of the actual inner workings or the components behind that. So you do have to, the prompt is very important, but also is that actual application capable of implementing something so complex? If it gets to that stage, back to your original point, David, that prototype stage, people don't really tend to get out of it, because they probably get the nice, pretty dashboard. It looks good. They're like, oh, this is really nice. And then once they get to that next step where they have to actually implement the hard part, if you like, that's when people are probably falling off, because if their expertise aren't up there with, like a high level software engineer, website developer, whatever it may be, you're not really going to know exactly what you're looking at. Bolt, exactly, with you seeing all the files as well and how quick it writes code, you're not going to be able to just jump in and change things here and there. Even if you are, I think all three of us can agree. And even if you are a developer, I think this is the same case for even before AI, trying to jump into code you haven't written yourself is quite difficult. I think, would you agree?
Yeah, like also like with Bolt and Lovable, like they write the code like to the standard. Not that developers don't do that, but oftentimes, that could be out of date as well, or it could be trained on something that's like the idea of that. But yeah, no, you're honest and right. It's very difficult. Say for example, you built something with Bolt or Lovable, and you started using that, and then you did want someone to maintain it, you'd have to find someone that had that,
Yeah.
that specialty to be able to do that. And then the thing is, they don't know truly. Like they'd have to really spend time to work out all the inner workings.
Bolt especially, I think, has now got a direct, I'm not sure if Lovable does. I'm probably a bit more biased towards Bolt because I've used it more, but I know the Bolt now has a direct connection to Figma, which is what I would primarily use to design any sort of website or anything like that for our clients. And I mean, obviously it's good. I have used it, and I have sort of built a demo, if you like, on Figma and then exported it to Bolt. And the result, I wouldn't say was good. Like any AI, the translation from what you tell it to do to the result is never going to be exactly the same. I back to your point, David, originally, with everything sort of looks the same with AI, and I think that's the same across the board. When you think of websites, you want them to be unique. You want them to come across in a way that people, when they go onto your site, it's not like they've seen the same site before. And I feel like if we ever sort of get into that bad habit of generating websites and say people sort of generate loads of websites, you would start to see a lot of overlap, because I think and it's probably bad for me given that I'm design oriented, but I think the biggest drawback of AI is the design side of it. I think that AI is just not creative enough when it comes to those types of things. I think dashboards and web apps, it's fine with, because they are very generic, but websites are quite unique. And I feel like that's where that sort of, you sort of hit that bottleneck. Now, again, they are starting to integrate, as I said, Figma is coming into Bolt. That may get better in the future. Figma itself, leading away even from Bolt and Lovable, Figma itself also now has its own AI built into it. What you can now do, instead of maybe wasting hours generating, say, components like buttons or, call to action sections, things like that, you can now get those generated pretty much by a prompt. Which it doesn't knock a whole lot of time off, but if you're building say I'm building a massive website with maybe 20 to 40 pages or something like that, when you start to add those up, it could be 5 minutes for maybe 5 or 6 components per page. So it does. And again, productivity is the main thing. Back to your sort of introduction, Marcus, with the businesses and improving productivity, that's what AI should be for. And there is that stigma, oh, it's replacing jobs. It's not replacing jobs at all. It's being able to utilize the tools to make your jobs more efficient, in my opinion. And I think that I say this all the time, but I think we're only at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to where AI will probably go in the next sort of 2 to 3 years.
You touched on a good point there, which is about design and like a lot of the AI now it seems to be focused on design and like marketing, like the thing that kind of requires human touch. You know what I mean? They kind of require they're the thing your customers are actually going to be interacting with.
Yeah.
Stuff that maybe you would do in the back end, like the a CRM or those sort of things that you could use Bolt or Lovable to kind of replicate. Those are the sort of things that you would kind of imagine you would use them for because they're not customer facing.
Yeah, I would say it's one of those things where essentially, the easiest example for AI usage is to automate repetitive processes and things that essentially eat time that don't need to. Whereas the goal with that is then it means you can spend time on other more important things, and the creative side of things is always going to be one of those. It's a interesting thought experiment in terms of, okay, how does an AI know visual aesthetic really? Well, it's using training data based off what it can find image wise and other examples it's been fed, and that only goes so far. It's not going to be you're not going to be able to hand it a branding pack and then it knows what looks good and what doesn't. It will just try things and see if you like it. So
I think the design part of AI is definitely a wee bit left behind. Even things down to like logo design, I feel like ChatGPT is getting better, but it's just not there yet. I mean, if we even dive deeper, like you mentioned websites, obviously the actual building of the website and the design of the website, but even things that is on the pages. So if we think of images, I think we can all agree when we're working with clients, the biggest struggle normally is getting them getting some images to provide for certain pages because they don't really know what to put. We don't really know what to put if it's a specialized industry. So I think that is really starting to bridge that gap. AI is starting to bridge that gap because ChatGPT, I think, has released its new version, ChatGPT 5. It is a lot better than the previous models, especially with the image generation. I think it's really upped its standard. And we've started to utilize tools like that for generating images for websites, for blogs, for pretty much any area of content for a website. It's not just ChatGPT. I mean, those sort of Bolt, Lovable, things like that, they do have sort of built-in image generations. Now, granted, they're not great, but they're still built in. They still have something in there. There's other tools that are very good at creating images. Sometimes Leonardo, it's the prompt is because it's so detailed and it creates such a detailed image. You really need to dial in with the prompt, or it will give you something that you do not want. But when you actually get the prompt right for Leonardo, it is really, really powerful. And some of the images that I've created before, you wouldn't actually know that they're AI. Whereas ChatGPT, I think if you created maybe 7 or 8 images, you can guarantee 5 of those images. There's a lot of overlap with, say, the people look the same or the sort of the room they're in looks the same. There's going to be some sort of overlap. And that's just the lack of creativity, which comes with the artificial intelligence at the minute. But I do feel like in the next maybe 6 months to a year, they will start concentrating a wee bit more on the design side. Because I think given our conversation here today, I think that is probably the part that's lagging behind a little bit.
it's going to be a tricky one. Again, you can see it as a drawback, or you can see it as opportunity. If AI speeds up some of the rest of your processes, then hopefully you have a little bit more time to be creative. Might be the other way to kind of take the view of it.
It helps, remove bottlenecks. Like a lot of people like just need to start, and at least with AI, like you've got a way to start. Even you don't have a blank page, you can just be like, give me something. There's so many, prototype being and people using them and so many more sites. There's like millions of AI type being built because people just have, the tools now to be able to build it. You don't necessarily need to have, it's kind of like having someone to hold your hand kind of to go through it. So it's quite, liberating in a way for people as well. There's especially the image generation one, because obviously like sometimes photography is expensive, like to go out get those photos stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That again, back to that productivity standpoint, like that's that bridges that gap. And you mentioned there people starting out, maybe starting a new company or maybe at the early stages of it's still a small company, and applications and stuff like that, they cost money, obviously subscription costs and things like that. And all these AI tools we're speaking of obviously have a cost with them, sometimes more hidden costs than you would believe. For example, Bolt connects directly to a database system, but it has quite a strict throttling sort of setup. So if you have an influx of users on the website, say it's a website, it will actually crash a little bit, and or charge you a lot of money. I was going to lead into what other sort of areas you could use the sort of Bolt for. And if we think of small businesses just needing a simple solution for day-to-day workings that they would be using, I would think of things like maybe like an invoicing system. Obviously invoicing system, I'm not saying they're very expensive. That's not the case at all, because they probably are quite affordable, especially given that there's so many of them. But this could be another cost that could be dramatically saved with something like Bolt. Because it's such a simple sort of setup, it's something that I think that could be developed quite easily. A good example I would probably give is, imagine it if you were sort of in the logistics world and you had loads of lorries or, vans, whatever it may be, and you wanted to keep maintenance records of that. Those types of systems that would probably do things like that probably would get quite expensive. And again, it is quite simple functionality. So something like and I'm not saying obviously every business is going to be different and have different needs, but something like that could be very, I wouldn't say the word easily, because that's not fair, but it could be doable to be created in the likes of Lovable or Bolt or whatever other new system that comes out in the next 6 months.
Like most of those systems that would do something like that, they'll probably have a lot of features, and they'll probably have an onboarding cost. They'll have all these things that people would, if you were just even going to try out a system, it would be costly that way. Whereas you can just get a tailored one that maybe just has the feature you want. Like maybe you don't need all the other bells and whistles, you just need that one specific functionality. And also you can just have the things you need. So, and Lloyd's, like add all that has on it.
There will be businesses in different kind of states as well. If we take, for example, okay, yeah, if you're in the finance or kind of logistical side of things, and so, stats are going to be a big part for you, in theory, okay, if you don't have anything already, then Bolt could be seen as a solution to getting a piece of software that helps facilitate your specific needs and requirements. And even some businesses, they may already have something in place, and all that they might be looking for AI-wise is something to help generate reports and that as well. So, there'll be different kind of demands depending on where businesses are at as well. Some of them will have things established that they'll be happy to use, and then their usage of AI will be in report generation, or perhaps having a chatbot implemented in some way for support or documentation. So there'll be a couple different levels depending on where businesses are.
You imagine your business, obviously everything's going to be completely different per business, but if you imagine your business and you think, oh, actually I could do with a piece of software to do that instead of me having to, I think everybody relies a lot on Excel spreadsheets, things like that for times, especially when it comes to accounting or keeping records of inventory or anything like that. And there is a time where there's a lot of limitation with it. If you want to upload images and store more detailed records and get maybe more advanced reporting, you do have to move into some sort of software. And David, you made a really good point. A lot of the software you get nowadays comes with 100 features. You may only need 2 of those features, but you'll end up paying for 100 of them. The price for those 100 is probably fair, but given that you're not going to utilize all those, again, it becomes a bit obsolete to go down that route. So that is the scenario that I would sort of put in people's heads with these types of programs that there is now. Bolt, I've used it quite a bit for small things and more for just to check and see how it works and how good it is. And at the start when it came out, it was a little bit slow and a bit clunky, but now I do think it's gotten a lot better. David, you made a good point. It probably, in terms of development rules and sort of the way to do things, it does do everything by the book, which can sometimes throw people off because everybody has different ways of coding and laying their code out. But at the same time, it's a good thing for even if you imagine people coming into the software development sort of world and they're just learning, it means that you're not listening to something or watching something create and it be wrong. It's doing it the correct way, which is obviously a huge benefit as well. But no, I think for those small to mid-sized businesses, there is so many different areas of these platforms that can be utilized to create small things to help the business and be more productive.
Another wee interest then that I have is we've talked about a couple different tools, and you mentioned a few limitations that these, various tools have. What are they like in terms of pricing structure? Are they like traditional kind of pricing models with different levels, monthly and annual kind of payments? Do we typically see credited usage or are unlimited usage kind of packages available?
So that's the thing. They do have enterprise option, but there you have to contact them to get a quote for that. For most people, they're starting out at $25 for both of them, for Lovable or Bolt. But they use a credit system, which is becoming very, very popular in AI startups and companies, and it's very complicated. Like even as someone who uses these tools, I don't understand what's going on. So the way it works is you have credits or tokens, sometimes they're called, and basically for everything you type into the chatbot, it will use so many tokens. And essentially what that means is, let's say you have a really long prompt and it has to think a wee bit longer, that might use 10,000, 20,000 tokens. If you had a really small prompt, it might only use 5,000 tokens, but you can't leave them they can be, really fastly gone. Lovable uses credit, so it's a wee bit different. I think the Lovable one is basically you get so many prompts.
I think it's fair to say, yeah, they've got, there's slightly different nuance, but I suppose to give some context to anyone not familiar, essentially what's kind of going on is these AI businesses are just trying to limit essentially the amount of usage in terms of power usage is pretty much one of the big factors. Every time that you run a prompt, that's got to run somewhere, and that's eating up electricity. It's a big, wider discussion that we'll not delve into today around AI usage. So essentially, that's why there would be caps and limitations or credit usage to try and do this. But for sure, it's always worth having a wee read into these for any AI tools that you decide to use out there, not just for development, but in any sphere, because they're all using vastly different models that are all more confusing than the next one. What about you, Dylan? You've encountered anything there?
Yeah. So I've noticed with Bolt, when you get by that prototype phase that we've spoke about today, when the application starts to get bigger and there's a lot more files and a lot more for it to understand, it picks more credits or tokens, whatever it may be, for each prompt. Because whenever it gets to a certain size and you load up the application, once you submit your first prompt, say you start like work on like in the morning or something, you go in and you type in a prompt, it'll tell you straight away that you'll be using more credits because your application is of a certain size. So I have noticed that with Bolt. Now, again, I haven't used Lovable just as much, but it is something to be wary of because it's, David, you said it, it's quite complex to kind of get your head around these things because Bolt, I think the $25, it gives you 10 million or something like that, 10 million tokens. Yeah, so you think 10 million, oh, I'll never go through those. I can guarantee you'll be at 1 million and you'll need more before you would even think about it. I would say one of the drawbacks or one thing to watch is the way that they structure the pricing and their usage, because you may think you're getting a deal because it's 10 million. And that's probably one of the reasons they've put it in these big quantities, but really you go through them pretty quickly. You could use maybe 100,000 on one prompt. If you're asking it to do so many things, you could use 100,000 or even more for one prompt.
Yeah, I suppose another wee question that I had for you guys is, what do you think the ceiling is on each of them, at least currently, and then where do you see them going? So we've already seen a lot of these tools, as you said, adapt over the last year and 2 years as they have become more prominent and they've been developed out and refined a little bit. I suppose comparing what they can produce to what has been manually produced already, or at least mostly manually produced, we'll assume, can never tell at a glance. Do you see any kind of ceiling with them? Is there only so far that they can go at the moment? Is there any particular issues that they've run into aside from some of the cost limitations? Anything from a technical or design side of things?
I think the biggest thing that we need to be considerate of is when you get through that sort of initial stage and you have something built. If you have a really good product and you're ready to take it to market, and say it's an app and you're ready to put it live and let everybody log into it, you do have to consider the small things that people never think about. And again, David, you might have something to add to this, going to give it more inner workings with this, but security, it's it's a big thing, but people don't think about it. If you produce an app and it has any sort of login system or it has any critical data inside of it, you need to make sure that is all secured and everything is locked away as it should. That's definitely a drawback because again, these applications are made for people who aren't too familiar with coding, and it's probably something you wouldn't even think of. Now, of course, you can ask it to implement security measures and stuff like that, but unless you're a professional, you won't know if that's 100% the way it should be done. Whereas WordPress, Shopify, any of those sort of integrated platforms, they all come with security built into them. So I think that's probably one of the big drawbacks. As I said earlier on, I think front end development, getting those initial dashboards and getting those initial pages sort of done and getting an idea for them, I think that's what it's really good at. I think the behind the scenes of that, I don't think it's quite there yet.
Obviously, like a lot of these companies are American, so there's not really much consideration for like GDPR that we would have. So like for example, like is the data stored in the EU? Those sort of things. Those are the things you're going to get from a professional that you wouldn't necessarily get from the cookie consent. Those sort of things.
There's a lot, I think, that these companies will have to take into account, both to kind of globalize their product to meet things like, data protection requirements. Security, for sure, Dylan, is a big one as well, because even if you can, instruct any kind of prompt to, okay, create this, meet this requirement, this requirement, this requirement, nothing is set in stone, sadly. When it comes to security, a year or two could go by and then could have a vulnerability or two that's sneaked its way in there somehow, somewhere. And yeah, it's trying to find that transition from what has been done traditionally. So, if we take a working example of, something that we work with quite a bit with a ProfileTree for WordPress, WordPress is built off of, you choose a theme and you install plugins that carry out certain bits of either front or back end kind of functionality on the website. And all of those themes, assuming you have a license and they're properly sourced plugins and themes, they'll get updates running essentially over time because they have support and people pay for licenses. And so then they're getting that level of care to make sure that they are staying compatible, adding new features and staying safe from the security side of things as well. If you create things statically, then that still needs a level of care. It can't just sit there. And it's more likely, potentially, if somebody creates something using any of these AI tools, that they create something they don't understand and then don't know that it needs to be taken care of then. So it's not a problem unique to, generating software and websites in this way, but it can be exaggerated by it a little bit.
Yeah, I think that the security would be my biggest worry out of anything with these applications. I think that would be my sort of, if you like, red flag for these apps.
Before we come to an end, I suppose to end on a wee positive note, if any of you guys had a tool that you would recommend for people to test right now, could be one of the ones one of the tools that you guys have talked about already, or something else completely different. What would you recommend having a play around with, giving a test? Start with you, Dylan.
I'm going to be biased here, and I'm going to say Bolt because I've had a lot of fun using Bolt, and I think I think it's quite intriguing to use, especially if you haven't used anything like it before. I think it's definitely worth a go. Obviously, we've talked about limitations and the negative sides of it, but there is plenty of positives to outweigh those parts. Again, I would encourage anybody. There's a sort of initial free credits you get with Bolt. So go in, create an account, and give it a go. Create something completely random. It doesn't have to be even tailored to you or your business. I've been in technology for a long time, websites, all that sort of thing, and I still find it very thrilling to watch something generate a full front-end dashboard within about 2-3 minutes.
I'm going to say Lovable because
There we go.
I did use it briefly. So with the free credits, you'll probably get 2 prompts, not too many, to be honest. It's not a lot, but I do think it is worth trying just because it's very cool, as Dylan said, to see. The other thing is interactive, do you know what I mean? So if you have to build something, you can actually interact and, you use it there and then. The only thing that I want to add about the Lovable one that's important to know is that on the free plan, everything you generate is public. So just be aware of that. On Bolt, it isn't. So maybe Bolt is the one to go for. I'm on the paid plan, but
He talked himself out of it at the end there.
but if you want to try something that isn't, sensitive data or anything, sensitive, I would definitely try Lovable. It's very good. And you can just delete your account. It's at the end of it all, but yeah, that'd be my recommendation.
Awesome. So yeah, a couple wee bits of things to try, a bit of homework for everybody watching if you're so interested. But yeah, I think we'll wrap up this episode here. So yeah, thank you everyone for your time. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video, and yeah, have a great day. Bye now.